The wind howls outside, rain slashing against the windows, a symphony of darkness and dread. It's the kind of night that makes you want to lock your doors, huddle under the covers, and pray you never have to experience the raw, primal fear of being truly alone. Have you ever feared being stranded alone with no help in sight? Tonight we delve into 3 horrifying true stories where running out of gas turned into a nightmare. These aren't just stories, guys. These are real-life accounts of people just like you and me who found themselves facing their darkest fears on the side of the road. Picture this, a desolate highway cutting through miles of dense, eerie forest. The road stretches endlessly with no sign of civilization in sight, just an unbroken line of asphalt disappearing into the horizon. The kind of place where the trees seem to watch you, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. Each tree appears to have a life of its own, whispering secrets to the wind, creating an atmosphere thick with unease. It's the kind of place that already sends shivers down your spine even before anything even happens. The air feels heavy, almost as if the forest itself is holding its breath, waiting for something to break the stillness. Our first story takes us deep into the heart of this unsettling landscape, where a young woman named Sarah found herself stranded after her car sputtered to a stop. The engine coughed one last time before falling silent, leaving her in the eerie quiet of the forest. Imagine the fear gripping Sarah's heart as she realized her predicament. She was completely alone, her phone showing no bars, the silence around her broken only by the eerie creaking of the trees in the wind. The realization that she was miles away from any help began to sink in. Miles from civilization, she felt a growing sense of dread. Night was falling, and with it came a bone-chilling cold that seeped into her car, chilling her to the core. The temperature seemed to drop with every passing minute, and the darkness outside grew thicker, more oppressive. Minutes turned to what felt like hours as Sarah sat in her car, her heart pounding in her chest. She tried her phone again and again, hoping for a miracle, but the result was always the same. No signal. Each failed attempt only heightened her anxiety, making her feel more isolated. The feeling of isolation was suffocating, the silence around her amplifying every rustle of leaves, every creak of her car. The forest seemed to close in on her, the trees standing like silent sentinels, watching her every move. She knew she couldn't stay in the car forever, but the thought of venturing out into the darkness, into that unsettling forest, filled her with a primal fear she couldn't shake. The unknown loomed large, every shadow a potential threat, every sound a possible danger. Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead, knowing that she had to find a way out of this nightmare. Our next story takes us deep into the heart of Appalachia, where the mountains hold secrets as old as time itself. These ancient peaks have witnessed countless tales, some of which have been lost to the annals of history, while others linger in the whispers of the wind. It was just past midnight, the thick darkness of the forest pressing in on all sides, when a young couple, Mark and Jessica, found themselves stranded on a winding mountain road after their car suffered a flat tire. The night was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that amplifies every rustle and distant cry of nocturnal creatures. They had been driving for hours, the monotony of the highway lulling them into a false sense of security. Music played softly on the radio, their conversation filled with laughter and plans for the future. They spoke of their dreams, their hopes, and the adventures they would embark on together, blissfully unaware of the impending ordeal. They were blissfully unaware of the danger lurking just around the bend, of the way the forest seemed to hold its breath, watching them with unseen eyes. The trees stood tall and silent, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching out into the night as if trying to warn them of the perils ahead. The flat tire came without warning, a loud bang followed by the sickening feeling of the car pulling to one side. Mark struggled to control the vehicle, bringing it to a bumpy stop on the shoulder of the narrow road. The sudden jolt shattered their sense of security, leaving them in a state of shock and confusion. Their laughter died in their throats, replaced by a heavy silence broken only by the sound of their own ragged breathing. They were miles from the nearest town, their phones useless without a signal. The realization of their isolation began to sink in, a cold dread creeping into their hearts. The darkness outside the car was absolute, the kind of darkness that feels alive, pulsing with unseen energy. The air grew heavy, thick with the smell of damp earth and pine needles, a scent that spoke of decay and secrets best left buried. The forest seemed to close in around them, its presence almost tangible, as if it were a living entity with its own malevolent intentions. Mark, ever the optimist, tried to reassure Jessica, his voice strained but calm. He told her they would be fine, that someone would come along eventually. He spoke with a confidence he didn't truly feel, hoping to keep her spirits up despite the growing sense of unease. But deep down, a primal fear gnawed at his gut. He had heard the stories, the local legends whispered around campfires, tales of strange creatures and disappearances in these very woods. The thought of those eerie tales sent shivers down his spine, and he couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone, that something was watching them from the shadows. Mark decided to check the trunk for a spare tire and tools, hoping to fix the flat and get back on the road. He grabbed a flashlight and stepped out into the night, the beam cutting through the darkness but revealing little beyond the immediate vicinity. Jessica stayed in the car, her eyes darting nervously around, every shadow seeming to move with a life of its own. As Mark struggled with the tire, the minutes seemed to stretch into eternity. Jessica watched anxiously, her heart pounding in her chest. The forest around them remained eerily silent, as if holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The sense of foreboding grew stronger with each passing moment. Suddenly, Jessica thought she saw something move in the distance, a shadowy figure with glowing eyes. She blinked, unsure if her mind was playing tricks on her. She called out to Mark, her voice trembling, but he was too focused on the tire to notice. The figure seemed to vanish as quickly as it had appeared, leaving her questioning her own sanity. Finally, Mark managed to change the tire, and they both breathed a sigh of relief. They quickly got back into the car, eager to leave the oppressive darkness of the forest behind. As they drove away, the sense of unease lingered, a reminder of the night's strange events and the mysteries that the Appalachian Mountains still hold. The forest receded into the distance, its secrets once again hidden in the shadows. Mark and Jessica would never forget their midnight breakdown, a chilling reminder of the unknown lurking just beyond the edge of the familiar. The mountains had let them go this time, but the memory of that night would stay with them forever. A testament to the ancient, untamed spirit of Appalachia. Our final story takes us to the desolate expanse of the Nevada desert, where the heat can be as unforgiving as the loneliness. The vast, barren landscape stretches out endlessly, a sea of sand and rock under a merciless sun. Imagine the scorching sun beating down on an endless ribbon of asphalt, the air shimmering with heat, the silence broken only by the occasional lonely howl of the wind. The road seems to go on forever, a never-ending path through a land that feels almost otherworldly in its isolation. This is where our next protagonist, a young truck driver named David, found himself stranded after his rig ran out of fuel. Alone in this vast wilderness, he was miles away from the nearest town or gas station. David had been driving for days, hauling cargo across the vast emptiness of the American West. The journey had been long and grueling, but he was used to the solitude and the endless stretches of highway. He was used to the solitude, the long stretches of highway where the only company was the sound of his own thoughts and the hum of the engine. The road had always been a place of reflection for him, a place where he could think and be alone with his thoughts. But this time something felt different. The desert seemed more menacing, the silence more oppressive. The vast emptiness that had once been a source of comfort now felt like a prison. A sense of unease had settled over him, a prickling at the back of his neck that he couldn't shake. It was as if the desert itself was watching him, waiting for him to make a mistake. He had seen the signs for the last gas station miles back, but he had been pushing it, trying to make up for lost time. He had hoped to reach the next town before nightfall, but now that seemed impossible. He cursed his own recklessness as the engine sputtered and died, the sudden silence deafening in the vastness of the desert. The hum of the engine had been his only companion, and now it was gone. He checked his phone, but there was no signal, of course. The desert had swallowed up all traces of civilization, leaving him completely cut off from the outside world. He was stranded miles from civilization, with the sun beating down on him like an angry god. The heat was unbearable, and there was no shade to be found. He knew he couldn't stay in the truck for long. The cab would become an oven, and he would be cooked alive if he stayed. The heat would turn the cab into an oven within hours. He had to make a decision, and he had to make it fast. He grabbed his emergency supplies, a meager collection of water, granola bars, and a beat-up first aid kit. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. It wouldn't last long, but it was something. He had to hope that it would be enough to get him through until he could find help. He locked the truck, his throat tight with a fear he hadn't felt since he was a child. The desert was a harsh and unforgiving place, and he was completely at its mercy. The highway stretched out before him, a shimmering ribbon of asphalt disappearing into the horizon. It was a daunting sight, but he had no other choice. He could walk, but in this heat it was suicide. The sun was relentless, and the temperature was rising with each passing minute. He scanned the horizon, desperate for any sign of life, a car, a building, anything. But there was nothing, just the endless expanse of the desert, baking under the relentless sun. Just the endless expanse of the desert, baking under the relentless sun. David took a deep breath, steeling himself for the journey ahead. He knew it would be a test of his endurance and willpower, but he had no other choice. He had to survive. David's story, like Sarah's and Mark and Jessica's, serves as a chilling reminder that even in our modern world there are still places where the unexpected can happen, where the line between reality and nightmare blurs. These stories remind us that sometimes the real horrors are the situations we least expect. Always be prepared, and never underestimate the importance of a full tank of gas, because you never know what lurks on the open road, waiting for the moment you find yourself stranded and alone.